My wife accused me of a crime I didn't commit just to protect her lover, my own brother. I spent 3 years behind bars while they lived comfortably in my house. Every month, they came pretending to feel sorry for me, but I refuse to see them. The day I walk out of prison will be the same day their lies destroy them. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Calvin Mercer's alarm went off at 5:30 every morning, the same digital beep that had pulled him from sleep for the past 12 years. He reached over in the dark, found the button by muscle memory, and sat up slowly. The bedroom was cold. November had settled in a cedar ridge like an unwelcome guest, the kind that stayed too long. Rena didn't stir beside him. She never did anymore. He dressed in a bathroom with the door closed, jeans worn soft at the knees, a flannel shirt that smelled like detergent, and something faintly metallic from yesterday's work. His reflection in the mirror looked tired. 42 years old, and his face showed every one of them. Lines around his eyes, gray starting at his temples. He splashed water on his face and didn't bother shaving. The kitchen light hummed when he flicked it on. Same chipped mug waiting by the coffee maker, the one Rena bought him years ago with "World's Okayest Husband" printed on the side. She thought it was funny then. He filled it with black coffee and stood at the sink, looking out at the backyard through the window. The grass needed cutting one last time before winter. He'd do it Saturday. The house settled around him with small creaks and sighs. 17 years they'd lived here. Raised no children. Rena said she wasn't ready, then said the moment had passed. Calvin had accepted it the way he accepted most things, quietly and without complaint. His truck started on the second try. The county maintenance logo on the door was faded, peeling at the edges. He meant to get it repainted, but never got around to it. The radio played something low and forgettable as he drove through empty streets toward the water treatment facility on the edge of town. Calvin liked mornings, liked the silence, liked knowing what the day would bring. Check the chlorine levels, inspect the filtration systems, fix whatever small thing had broken overnight. Problems at work had solutions. You followed procedures. You documented everything. You went home. By the time he pulled into the facility parking lot, the sun was just starting to think about rising. His supervisor's truck was already there. Dale Preston was 10 years older, 20 pounds heavier, and had worked for the county since before Calvin was born. "Morning," Calvin said, meeting him at the gate. Dale nodded, unlocking the chain. "Pump 3's making noise again. You want to check the bearings?" "I'll look at it." They walked in together, their boots crunching on gravel. The facility smelled like chlorine and wet concrete, a smell Calvin had long stopped noticing. He grabbed his toolbox from the truck bed and headed toward the pump house. The work was methodical, peaceful even. He loosened bolts, checked seals, listened to machinery the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. Everything had a rhythm. Everything made sense. His phone buzzed around noon. A text from Rena. "Troy's coming for dinner. Grab beer on the way home." Calvin stared at the message longer than necessary. Troy came for dinner at least twice a week now, sometimes more. His older brother had a way of showing up whenever he needed something: money, a place to stay, someone to complain to about his latest failed relationship or fired from job. Calvin texted back, "Okay." He didn't ask why. He used to, but Rena would just say Troy was family, and family helped each other. That was true enough. Their father had said the same thing before he died. "Take care of your brother. He needs you more than you need him." Calvin had been taking care of Troy for 38 years. When Calvin got home that evening, Troy's truck was already in the driveway. A newer model, silver paint still shiny despite Troy claiming he was broke. Calvin parked on the street and grabbed the six-pack of cheap beer from the passenger seat. Inside, he could hear Rena laughing. That big, loud laugh she saved for other people. She didn't laugh like that with him anymore. "There he is," Troy said from the couch when Calvin walked in. The working man. Troy had the same dark hair Calvin did, the same broad shoulders, but everything about him looked easier, looser. Like life was a joke he was in on and everyone else wasn't. "Hey," Calvin said. He set the beer on the kitchen counter and pulled one free, twisting the cap off. Rena came around from the stove, wooden spoon in hand. She'd changed clothes since this morning. Wore a red top that showed her collarbones, jeans that fit different than her work slacks. Her blonde hair was down instead of pulled back. "Took you long enough," she said, but she was smiling. Not at him. Past him toward Troy. "Traffic," Calvin lied. There was never traffic in Cedar Ridge. Dinner was spaghetti. Rena made it often because it was cheap and filled plates. They ate at the small table in the kitchen, Troy talking most of the time about some business idea he had, some opportunity that just needed a little startup money. "I'm telling you, Cal, this could be big. I just need like 5,000 to get it rolling." Calvin chewed slowly. Swallowed. "What kind of business?" "Online retail. Drop shipping. You don't even need inventory. You just connect buyers and sellers and take a cut." "Sounds like a scam," Calvin said. Troy's smile tightened. "It's not a scam. It's the future." "Future of what?" "Making real money instead of fixing toilets for the county." Rena laughed. Not the big laugh. A smaller one. "Calvin likes his job. Don't you, honey?" There was something in her voice. Something sharp hidden under the sweetness. "It pays the bills," Calvin said. "Barely," Rena said. She wasn't smiling anymore. The conversation moved on, but Calvin stayed quiet, eating his spaghetti and drinking his beer. Troy and Rena talked like he wasn't there, about people they knew, things happening in town, gossip Calvin didn't care about. They leaned toward each other when they talked. Rena touched Troy's arm twice. Calvin noticed. He didn't say anything. After dinner, Troy stayed for 2 more beers. Stayed until almost 10, sprawled on the couch with his boots kicked off like he owned the place. When he finally left, Rena walked him to the door. Calvin heard them talking low in the entryway, but couldn't make out the words. The door closed. Rena came back into the living room, where Calvin was watching a rerun of some cop show he'd seen before. "You could have been nicer to him," she said. Calvin didn't look away from the television. "I was fine. You barely talked. Didn't have much to say." Rena stood there for a moment, her arms crossed. Then she made a sound, something between a sigh and a laugh, and went to the bedroom. Calvin heard the door close. Not slammed, just closed with a firmness that meant something. He sat there alone in the blue light of the TV until midnight, then turned everything off and went to bed. Rena was already asleep, or pretending to be, turned away from his side with the blankets pulled tight around her. Calvin lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, the water heater kicked on. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds. Everything normal. He fell asleep thinking about the pump bearings he'd need to order for work. The knock came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening just after dinner. Calvin was washing dishes when he heard it. 3 sharp raps that carried authority even through the front door. Rena looked up from her phone, something crossing her face too quick to read. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked. "No." He dried his hands on a towel and walked to the door. Through the small window, he could see 2 men in plain clothes, badges clipped to their belts. His stomach went tight for no reason he could name. He opened the door. "Can I help you?" The older one, graying hair and a mustache, spoke first. "Calvin Mercer? That's me. I'm Detective Harris. This is Detective Bowen. We're with the county sheriff's office. Mind if we come in and ask you a few questions?" Calvin's mouth went dry. "About what?" "Just some irregularities at the water department. Routine stuff. Won't take long." He stepped aside and let them in. Rena was standing now, her phone held against her chest. She looked worried. Or maybe she looked something else. The detectives sat on the couch. Calvin took the chair across from them. Rena stayed, standing near the kitchen, just at the edge of hearing. Detective Harris pulled out a small notebook. "How long you been working for the county?" "Calvin, 12 years. Good employee. I do my job. Ever have any disciplinary issues?" "Write-ups?" "No, never." Harris nodded like this confirmed something. "What about equipment? Tools, machinery, that sort of thing. You have access to county property." "Everyone does. It's part of the job." "Ever take anything home? Even temporarily?" Calvin's jaw tightened. "No." "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." Detective Bowen leaned forward, younger and sharper. "We've got work logs showing equipment signed out under your name. Expensive equipment. Some of it never came back." "That's not possible." "Why's that?" "Because I didn't sign anything out." Harris flipped through his notebook. "We've also got emails from your county account. Correspondence with a scrap metal buyer. Prices, quantities, delivery schedules." Calvin felt something cold spread through his chest. "I never sent those emails. They came from your account." Then someone else used it. Who would do that? I don't know. Bowen's expression didn't change. You having money problems, Calvin? No more than anyone else. Your wife works, right? Harris asked, glancing toward Rena. She spoke for the first time, her voice small. Part-time. At the library. That help with bills? We manage, Calvin said. Harris closed his notebook. Here's the thing, Calvin. We got documentation. Emails, work logs, witness statements. It all points to you selling county equipment. That's theft. That's fraud. That's serious. I didn't do it. Then who did? Calvin opened his mouth, but had no answer. His mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. Someone had used his email. Someone had forged signatures. Someone had. Calvin's been stressed lately, Rena said. Both detectives looked at her. Calvin turned in his chair. What? She wouldn't meet his eyes. You've been different. Drinking more. Coming home late. I don't. I've been worried about you. Her voice cracked just slightly. I thought it was just work stuff. Pressure. Detective Harris stood up slowly. Mrs. Mercer, has your husband ever talked about taking what he felt he was owed? Rena's silence lasted 3 seconds. That was all it took. Once, she whispered. Maybe twice. When he'd been drinking. Calvin stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. That's not true. Rena, what are you? I'm sorry, she said, and tears were forming in her eyes. Real tears. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I ignored it, it would stop. Stop lying. Sir, we need you to calm down, Bowen said, standing now too. Calvin's hands were shaking. He looked at his wife, this woman he'd been married to for 17 years, and saw a stranger. Why are you doing this? She didn't answer, just brought her hand to her mouth and turned away. Harris stepped closer. Calvin, we'd like you to come down to the station. Answer some more questions. It'll be easier there. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but we can arrange that if you'd prefer. Calvin looked at Rena one more time. She was crying silently now, her shoulders shaking. Acting. Had to be acting. But it looked so real. I'll get my coat, he said quietly. They questioned him for 6 hours. Asked the same questions different ways. Showed him printouts of emails he'd never written, work logs with signatures that looked like his but weren't. They brought in his supervisor, Dale, who sat there uncomfortable and confirmed that yes, equipment had gone missing. Yes, Calvin had access. Around midnight, they let him call a lawyer. Around 2 in the morning, they let him go home. Rena was still awake when he walked in, sitting on the couch in her pajamas, eyes red. I had to tell them the truth, she said before he could speak. Calvin stood in the doorway. What truth? What I've seen. What you've said. I never said anything. You were drunk, Calvin. You probably don't remember. I don't get drunk. She looked at him then, and her face was different. Harder. Maybe you don't remember a lot of things. He wanted to yell, wanted to shake her and demand she take it back, tell them she lied. But something stopped him. Some instinct that said shouting wouldn't help. Nothing would help. Did Troy put you up to this? He asked quietly. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. Troy has nothing to do with this. He was here. That night before they came. I saw you talking to him. So what? He's family. So, is that what this is? You and him. Rena stood up. Don't be pathetic, Calvin. This isn't about me cheating. This is about you stealing from the county and trying to blame everyone else. I didn't steal anything. Then why does all the evidence say you did? She walked past him toward the bedroom. Stopped at the door without turning around. You should sleep on the couch tonight, she said. I need space. The door closed. The lock clicked. Calvin stood alone in his living room and felt the world tilting underneath him, sliding him towards something dark and inevitable. He'd worked every day for 12 years, paid his bills, fixed things that broke, been reliable, been invisible, and somehow that wasn't enough. The trial came 4 months later. Public defender named Jenkins who looked tired before they even started. The prosecution had everything organized, professional, clean, email records, timestamps, IP addresses matching Calvin's home computer, work logs with his signature, and testimony. Rena took the stand in a blue dress Calvin had bought her 2 Christmases ago. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue while the prosecutor asked questions in a gentle voice. Did your husband ever express dissatisfaction with his job? Yes, often. Did he ever say the county owed him more? Several times. Did you notice any changes in his behavior before his arrest? Rena's voice broke. He started drinking, staying out late, getting angry over small things. It was all lies. Every word. But she said them like truth, and the jury believed her. Troy testified next, wearing a button-down shirt that was probably borrowed, hair combed back, looking earnest and uncomfortable. Did your brother ask you for help moving equipment? Yes. When was this? Late at night. September, I think. He said it was for work. Did you question it? I trusted him. He's my brother. Troy's voice wavered on those last words. He looked at Calvin across the courtroom, looked away fast. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge, an older woman with white hair and reading glasses, looked at Calvin without much emotion. Mr. Mercer, you've been found guilty of theft, fraud, and falsification of records. The evidence against you was substantial, and your actions represent a betrayal of public trust. Calvin stood there, didn't speak. His lawyer touched his arm, but he barely felt it. I'm sentencing you to 3 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. 3 years. The number didn't feel real. The bailiff came forward with handcuffs. Calvin put his hands behind his back and felt the metal close around his wrists. Cold. Final. As they led him toward the side door, he looked back one time. Rena was sitting in the front row. She caught his eye and mouthed something that might have been, "I'm sorry." But her eyes were dry now, clear and calm and satisfied. Calvin turned away and walked through the door into the rest of his life. The intake process at Greenfield Correctional Facility took 6 hours. Strip search, medical exam, photographs, fingerprints. They gave him a blue jumpsuit that smelled like industrial detergent and shoes with no laces. Assigned him a number, 847293. His cell was 8 by 10 feet. Concrete walls painted beige sometime in the last century. 2 bunks bolted to the floor. A steel toilet with no seat. A small window up high that showed a square of gray sky. His cellmate was a man named Rodney, 40-something, missing 2 teeth, in for assault. He looked Calvin up and down when the door locked behind them. What are you in for? Fraud. Rodney grunted and went back to reading a paperback Western with a broken spine. White collar. You'll be fine. Just keep your head down. Calvin climbed onto the top bunk and lay there staring at the ceiling. Somewhere down the block, someone was shouting. Metal doors clanged. A radio played country music too loud. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about Rena. Prison didn't break Calvin fast. It wore him down slowly like water on stone. The first month, he tried to make sense of it. Wrote letters to Jenkins, his public defender, asking about appeals. Got back form responses that said nothing. Wrote to his mother, short notes saying he was okay. Didn't write to Rena. The second month, he stopped writing to anyone except his mother. The days ran together. Wake at 6. Breakfast in the cafeteria, powdered eggs, and toast. Work detail in the laundry from 8 to 3, pressing county jail uniforms and prison sheets, the steam making the room 90 degrees. Dinner. Rec time. Lockdown at 9. Calvin learned the rules quickly. Don't ask questions. Don't make eye contact. Don't owe anyone anything. The men here existed in careful hierarchies based on violence and reputation and nothing else. Calvin had neither, so he stayed invisible. He got a job in the library after 3 months. Quieter than laundry. He could sit and read case law books, thick volumes with cracked leather covers and yellow pages. Started making notes on a legal pad. Dates, testimonies, inconsistencies. Rodney watched him from the cell bunk one night. What are you doing? Reading. That's appeal stuff. Yeah. You think you can fight it? Calvin didn't look up. I didn't do what they said I did. Everyone in here says that. I know. Rodney was quiet for a while. Then, maybe you didn't. Maybe you're the one guy who actually got railroaded. But it don't matter, does it? You're still here. Calvin closed the book. For now. The first visit request came during his 4th month. Rena and Troy. Together. Calvin sat in the visitation room at a table bolted to the floor, wearing his jumpsuit, waiting. When they walked in, something twisted in his chest. Rena looked good. Makeup done. Hair lighter than before. She smiled nervously when she sat down across from him. Troy sat beside her, hands folded, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Cal," Troy said. Calvin didn't respond. Rena reached across the table like she might touch his hand, then stopped. "How are you doing?" "I'm in prison." "I mean, are you okay? Are people treating you all right? Why are you here, Rena?" Her smile faltered. "We wanted to see you. We're worried." "Worried?" "Yes." Calvin looked at Troy. "You testify against me. Then you're worried?" Troy shifted in his chair. "I had to tell the truth, man. They asked me questions." "You lied." "I didn't lie. You asked me to help move that stuff." "No, I didn't." They stared at each other. Troy looked away first. Rena spoke quickly, nervous. "We're holding things down at home. Taking care of the house. Your tools are safe." "We're." "My tools?" "Yeah, in the garage." "Why will my tools need taking care of?" She blinked. "I just meant we're looking after everything. For when you get out." Calvin leaned back in his chair, studied her face. She was lying about something. He could see it in the way she wouldn't hold his gaze for long. "How's work?" he asked. "Same. The library's fine. Still part-time." "Yeah, must be hard. Making ends meet." Rena glanced at Troy, just a flicker. "We're managing." "We're." "Not I'm." Calvin nodded slowly. "I don't want you to visit again." Rena's face went pale. "What? Either of you. Don't come back." "Calvin, please." "I mean it." He stood up. The guard by the door straightened. "This visit's over. You can't just." "I can. And I am." He walked toward the door without looking back. Heard Rena call his name once, voice breaking. The guard let him through, and the door locked behind him. Back in his cell, Calvin lay on his bunk and felt something hard settle in his chest. Not anger. Something colder. Clarity. They came 2 more times over the next 6 months. Calvin refused both visits. After that, they stopped trying. His mother wrote every week. Small letters about the weather, neighbors, church. Safe topics. But in one letter, during his 9th month, she wrote something different. "I went by her house last Tuesday to drop off some mail that came my place. Rena's car was there, but she didn't answer. I saw Troy's truck in the garage through the window. I thought that was strange because you said she sold your tools to make space. Where would Troy park if your tools were gone? I don't want to say anything bad about family, but Calvin, I never believed that story they told. I know my son. You're a lot of things, but you're not a thief." Calvin read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in the small box under his bunk where he kept everything important. Rena sold his tools. Tools he collected over 15 years. Professional grade. Expensive. But Troy's truck fit in the garage now. Calvin's appeal hearing happened in his 11th month. Jenkins filed paperwork challenging the evidence, arguing prosecutorial misconduct. The hearing lasted 20 minutes. The judge, a different one this time, younger, bored, denied the appeal without much explanation. The evidence was properly obtained and presented. The jury made their decision. This court sees no reason to overturn it. Jenkins looked at Calvin apologetically. "I'm sorry. We could try again in 6 months." Calvin shook his head. "Don't bother. There might be." I said don't bother. Back in his cell, Calvin made a decision. He was done asking for help. Done expecting the system to fix its own mistakes. He requested access to phone records through a discovery motion. His own phone, Rena's phone, Troy's phone. The prison library had books on civil procedure. He read them slowly, carefully, learned the language, learned what he could request, and how. It took 4 months for the records to arrive. Boxes of them. Thousands of calls, texts, data points. Calvin sat in the library and went through them line by line with a pencil and notebook. Rena and Troy's phones. Hundreds of calls during work hours. Some during times Troy claimed he was with Calvin. Some that lasted 30, 40 minutes. But more important, the data logs. Rena had accessed Calvin's county email from her personal phone. Not once. Not accidentally. 18 times over 6 weeks before the arrest. She'd been in his account, reading his emails, probably sending them too. Calvin wrote everything down, made a timeline, cross-referenced dates with his own work schedules and Troy's testimony. The night Troy claimed they moved equipment, Calvin had been at his mother's house helping her fix a leaking pipe. His mother would remember. She'd have the receipt from the parts store. The emails to the scrap dealer? All sent during hours Calvin was clocked in at work. The IP address might match his home computer, but he wasn't home. Rena was. Piece by piece, the truth assembled itself. Not loud, not dramatic, just patient and inevitable. Rena had planned this. Carefully, methodically. She'd accessed his email, forged documents, coordinated with Troy. She'd sent those emails pretending to be Calvin. She'd created a perfect frame, and she'd almost gotten away with it. Calvin closed his notebook and sat back. Around him, the library was quiet. A few other inmates reading magazines. A guard standing by the door. He felt something he hadn't felt in almost 2 years. Not hope. Something sharper. Purpose. He had 9 months left on his sentence. 9 months to prepare. When he got out, he wouldn't go home angry. He wouldn't go home broken. He'd go home ready. They released Calvin on a Thursday morning in late April. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. He walked out through the processing center wearing the same clothes he'd worn at sentencing: jeans, flannel shirt, work boots. They'd been in a plastic bag for 3 years and smelled like storage. His mother was waiting in the parking lot, sitting in her old sedan with the engine running. She was 71 now, smaller than he remembered. When she saw him, she got out and hugged him hard. "Let's go home," she said. Home was her house, the one Calvin grew up in. A small ranch on the east side of town, with siding that needed painting and a lawn that needed mowing. She'd kept his old bedroom ready. Same twin bed, same dresser, same posters on the walls from when he was 17. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. No rush. Calvin set his bag down and looked around. The room was stuck in time. He was 45 now, a convicted felon, living in his childhood bedroom. He didn't let himself feel anything about that. "Thanks, Mom." She made him dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of meal she'd made 1,000 times before. They ate at her small kitchen table, and she talked about neighbors, the garden she was planning, church gossip. Safe subjects. She didn't ask about prison. Didn't ask about Rena or Troy. After dinner, Calvin helped with dishes. The warm water on his hands felt different than prison sinks. Softer. Almost strange. "I drove by your house last week," his mother said quietly. "Rena's still there." Calvin scrubbed the plate. "I figured." Troy's truck was in the driveway. "Also figured." "What are you going to do?" He rinsed the plate and set it in the rack. "Well, I should have done a long time ago." The lawyer's name was Patricia Monroe. She had an office above a hardware store downtown, 3 rooms with cheap paneling and fluorescent lights. Her assistant was her daughter, a college student who worked part-time. Calvin sat across from her desk while she reviewed the documents he'd brought. Phone records, email access logs, a timeline he'd written out by hand. His mother's sworn statement about the night he'd supposedly been moving equipment with Troy. Monroe was in her 50s, gray hair cut short, glasses on a chain around her neck. She read everything twice without speaking. Finally, she looked up. "This is good work. Is it enough? To reopen your case? Possibly. To get your conviction overturned." She paused. "Maybe. We need to prove prosecutorial misconduct or present new evidence that creates reasonable doubt. These phone records are new. The email access logs are new. That helps. How long will it take?" "Months. At least 6, probably more." Calvin nodded. He'd expected that. "What do I owe you?" "Let's start with a consultation fee. $500. After that, we'll see." He pulled out cash, money his mother had loaned him. $500 in 20s. Monroe counted it and wrote him a receipt. "I'll file the motion tomorrow," she said. "But Calvin, I need to be honest with you. Even if we prove someone else had access to your email, proving they actually sent those messages is harder. And proving your wife and brother conspired against you, that's a serious accusation. The court won't take it lightly. I know. You'll need witnesses. Evidence. Something that ties them directly to the fraud." "Troy will break," Calvin said quietly. Monroe raised an eyebrow. "You sound sure." "I am." The investigators came to Troy first. Calvin didn't watch it happen. Didn't need to. Monroe filed the appeal with the new evidence, and the county prosecutor's office had to respond. That meant re-examining the case. That meant questioning the original witnesses. Troy's statement had been key to the conviction. If Troy lied, the whole case crumbled. It took 2 weeks. Calvin was at his mother's house, fixing a loose board on her back porch, when Monroe called. "They questioned your brother this morning," she said, "at the sheriff's office. For hours." Calvin set down his hammer. "And he changed his story." Calvin said nothing, just waited. He claimed he misremembered dates. Said he might have been confused about whether you actually asked him to move equipment or whether someone else told him you did. The detectives pushed back, showed him the phone records between him and Rena, told him they were investigating conspiracy charges. What did he say? He asked for a lawyer. Calvin smiled without humor. He's scared, terrified, and when people are terrified, they make mistakes. Monroe paused. "The prosecutor wants to interview your wife next. Separately. They're going to pressure her too." When? Monday. Calvin hung up and went back to fixing the porch. The afternoon was warm, the first real warmth after a long winter. Birds were singing in the trees. Life going on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Rena's interview happened at 9 Monday morning. Calvin drove past the sheriff's office on his way to nowhere in particular. Her car was in a lot. She'd be inside now, sitting across from detectives, answering questions. Confident at first, then less so. He didn't stop, just drove. Monroe called him at 11:30. She admitted accessing your email. Calvin pulled over to the side of the road. She what? Admitted it. Said she was checking your messages because she was worried about you. Thought you might be having an affair or hiding financial problems. The detectives asked why she accessed it 18 times. She said she couldn't remember that many times. They showed her the logs. Did she break? Not yet. She's sticking to the story that you were stressed, drinking, talking about stealing equipment. But her lawyer looked nervous. They're going to question her again. When? Tomorrow. And Calvin? They're reviewing Troy's phone records too, looking at text messages that were deleted. Forensic recovery. If there's communication between them about framing you, they'll find it. Calvin closed his eyes. How long before we know? Days. Maybe less. It was Troy who cracked. Wednesday afternoon. Monroe called with the news. He confessed. Full confession. Said Rena planned the whole thing. Said she wanted you out of the picture, wanted the house, wanted to be with him instead. She told him it would only be temporary, that you'd get a short sentence, and they'd be set up by the time you got out. Calvin sat on his mother's couch and stared at the wall. Calvin? You there? I'm here. The prosecutor's filing charges against both of them. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, perjury. The county clerk also came forward. Said Rena submitted paperwork using your name. Forged signatures on work orders. She has copies. So my conviction will be overturned. The prosecutor's already drafting the motion. You'll be officially exonerated within the week. Calvin ended the call and sat in the silence. His mother was at the grocery store. The house was empty except for him and the ghosts of everything that had happened. He'd been right. Troy broke first, but he didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel anything except tired. They arrested Rena at the library. Calvin heard about it from Dale, his old supervisor, who called him that evening. Saw it on the news. Your wife got arrested at work. Handcuffs and everything. You okay? Yeah. Hell of a thing. Yeah. Listen, Calvin. When all this gets cleared up, you want your job back. I'll talk to the county. They'll hire you back. Probably owe you back pay too. Calvin looked around his mother's living room. The TV showing some game show with the sound off. The old recliner his father used to sit in. Photos on the wall of a family that didn't exist anymore. I'll think about it, he said. You take your time. Just know the door's open. Calvin thanked him and hung up. The news showed Rena being walked out of the library in handcuffs. She kept her head down, blonde hair hiding her face. People stood around watching, filming on their phones. She looked small, breakable. Calvin turned the TV off. The exoneration hearing was brief. The judge, the same white-haired woman who'd sentenced him, looked at the new evidence and apologized. Mr. Mercer, on behalf of this court, I apologize for the miscarriage of justice you suffered. Your conviction is hereby vacated. All charges dismissed. That was it. 3 minutes to undo 3 years. Monroe walked out with him, down the courthouse steps in a bright sunlight. What will you do now? Calvin shrugged. Don't know yet. You could sue. Civil suit against Rena and Troy for damages. Lost wages, emotional distress. You'd probably win. I don't want their money. Then what do you want? Calvin thought about that. Stood on the courthouse steps in the town where he'd spent his whole life. Where he'd worked and married and built something he thought was real. I want me done, he said finally. Monroe nodded like she understood. Call me if you need anything. He shook her hand and walked to his truck alone. Rena's trial happened 6 months later. Troy took a plea deal. 5 years, eligible for parole in 2. He testified against Rena in exchange for the lighter sentence. Calvin attended the trial once. Sat in the back row and watched Rena at the defense table. She looked thinner, older. Her lawyer argued she'd been manipulated by Troy, that she was a victim too. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts. 7 years. As they led her away, she looked back into the courtroom. Found Calvin in the crowd. Their eyes met for 3 seconds. She mouthed something. Maybe sorry. Maybe please. Calvin stood and walked out. He didn't look back. 1 year later, Calvin stood in the driveway of the house he used to share with Rena. The bank had foreclosed. The windows were dark. The lawn overgrown. A realtor's sign stuck in the yard, faded by weather. He had a key. Rena's lawyer had sent it to him months ago, along with paperwork. The house was as if he wanted it. Part of the settlement. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Empty. Everything gone. Just carpet stains where furniture used to be. Nail holes in the walls. The smell of closed rooms and time passing. He walked through each room slowly. The kitchen where they'd eaten dinner. The bedroom where they'd slept. The spare room they never turned into a nursery. 17 years. Reduced to this. In the garage, his tools were actually there. Stacked neatly in the corner. Rena must have kept them after all. Or Troy brought them back. It didn't matter. Calvin stood in the empty house and felt nothing. Not sadness. Not anger. Just the quiet weight of finality. He thought about this moment for 3 years. Imagine what he'd feel when he finally stood here again. Thought maybe he'd rage or break down or finally let himself grieve. Instead, he just felt ready. Ready to sell it. Ready to leave. Ready to start something new somewhere else. He walked back through the house one last time, turned off all the lights, and locked the door behind him. Drove to his mother's house and made dinner. They ate together at her kitchen table, talking about small things. She was thinking about selling her house too, moving into something smaller. Maybe they'd both leave Cedar Ridge, go somewhere nobody knew their names. That night, Calvin lay in his childhood bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd call the realtor, list the house, take whatever price they could get. In a few months, he'd be gone from here. New town, new job, new everything. No contact with Rena. No contact with Troy. No forgiveness. No reconciliation. Just peace earned the hard way. He closed his eyes and slept without dreaming.